got a really lovely panel with us today of people with a lot of PPI experience and who have some really fascinating stories and experiences to share with you all. So I'm just really happy to be facilitating this today. We've got everyone on screen here, so we're welcoming Kevin, who might not quite be with us yet. He's got another commitment that he's just having to pop his head into and apologise, and then he'll be joining us. Michael, Helen, Javid and John are all here as part of our panel. You'll be getting to know them a little bit better during our discussion, but also in our breakout rooms, you'll have a little bit more of an opportunity to talk to people more one-to-one at that point. And your hosts today, myself, Zahida and Pallavi. I'm not going to take too long here. I'm going to hopefully pop on to the next slide. And this is just a quick overview of what we'll be doing today. Very brief introduction from me, and I will shut up very quickly. We're happy society today who's going to be giving us a quick vignette on successful PPI. Kevin is also going to be giving his experience, and then we're going to jump into our panel discussion where you've all asked some questions and we'll be answering those. Quick break and then breakout rooms where our panel have some questions for you as well, which will be interesting. So turning things the other way around, and some final thoughts.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everybody. I'm recognising a few faces, and I know it's from the recent Helsinki conference and probably other conferences that I've seen you. So I know we have some very experienced people in the room. And I've been working in patient and public involvement for quite a number of years now, and it's a real joy to work at Alzheimer's Society. It's not just a static model of involvement that we've been working on. It's evolving every year and every day, really. We have involved people in the research program at Alzheimer's Society for 24 years. I think we're probably the first organisation to invite people affected by dementia to be at the table for funding decisions, and that's carried on and evolved. So we now have around 350 volunteers who are all affected by dementia, either as carers, former carers, or living with a diagnosis. And they are reviewing our research applications and sitting at the table with our peer reviewers, and voting on what are the most impactful and fundable applications that we receive. From that, our patient public involvement program developed, because increasingly we are not the only funder who asks to see patient and public involvement articulated within a grant application. AMRC, NIHR, any of you have submitted applications or thinking about it, you'll see that that is a requirement. So we've found that by nature of us having a large group of people who are affected by dementia, that researchers have come to us increasingly over the years and said, yes, you want to see this, but can you help us carry it out and do it? And from our perspective, excellent patient public involvement really starts right at the beginning when you're thinking about the question that you're wanting to answer through your research. If it's about dementia, then it would make sense to share that idea with people affected by dementia to establish whether that is a priority. There could be a perspective that they bring to the table that would help you shape or articulate it in such a way as to really demonstrate the impact of that to the funding body. And that's a powerful first step. In terms of further steps along, so putting together your grant application, where you have any discussion or even debate around how the research will be carried out, if that's appropriate to the research that you're doing with people affected by dementia, especially if it is a clinical study where you're going to be engaging participants, then it really makes sense to be involving people who have an understanding of the complexities of participating in research and how to phrase things. You know, it's about language as much as it is about action. And I know if you're concentrating on biomedical research, that's often thought of as either too tricky or just an added bit of work that seems unnecessary. I've worked a lot at Alzheimer's Society and with other partners to identify the parts of biomedical research that can really benefit the most from patient and public involvement. And you're talking about, once again, right at the beginning, establishing the research question: what is the end result? How will that research impact either the landscape of dementia research, or how you can articulate the benefit to the individual? And a person affected by dementia who's involved in patient public involvement has a vested interest in your research. So even if it's the most difficult technical language and project that you can imagine, if you can explain it to them, they're gunning for you. You know, if you can't explain it to them, they're still gunning for you. They can help you explain it in layman's terms, and that is really important in the current sort of climate, shall we say, of the difficulties of achieving funding. If you can articulate your research in a way that is accessible, then you're ahead of the pack. Just got to get your science right as well. But yeah, so that's right at the beginning. And then at the end of the dissemination of your research, regardless of whether it's clinical or biomedical, it's that sharing. It's that, you know, what is the impact on the landscape, on society, on individuals, on communities, and the people who are affected by the condition themselves are the people who can really help you tap into the passion around that. You know, it's I don't know about you, but if I sit down with my family and describe my job and how passionate I am about it, they're you know, they're like, yeah, great, mum, nice. But if I sit down with people affected by dementia who have an absolute vested interest in it, they are going to go that distance with me, and we can end up talking for, you know, hours on end and come up with the best way to articulate it and ideas around what could happen next and where it links in with other research potentially that's going on. And that's another thing. You'll be talking to people affected by dementia on this call who are patient public involvement experts. They're not just experts in the notion, in the action of involvement. They've tapped into so many other research projects and so many other teams. Their knowledge of the landscape of dementia research is second to none. You know, if you want to get contacts or get some inside knowledge, your patient and public involvement contributors are often the best people to go to. I think I was tasked with 5 minutes. Have I gone over? I'm sorry, I do babble.
Possibly a little bit.
Yeah. Okay,
that's absolutely fine. Thank you. What we might do, if that's okay, is we might move straight into the questions now. What I'm going to ask is when our PPI panel members first answer a question, if you could also introduce yourselves very quickly, because I know we haven't had chance. It's just because we've got such a big group today, but I think this is a lovely way of doing it. So in advance of this meeting, several of you submitted some questions for our panel, and we're going to go through a few of those now, and our panel members are going to give their answers. So our very first question was, in your experience, how have researchers explained the length of time projects are going to take to complete, and how your, as a PPI panel member, input will be used in that research process and also incorporated in those real-world outcomes? And do we have some good and bad examples? So first up to answer this, I think we had John said you were looking to answer this. So if you wouldn't mind just quickly introducing yourself and giving your answer to this question.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name's John O'Doherty, and I live with both vascular dementia and prostate cancer. I've always been what's called an active participant in research. I had a heart attack in 2019. They don't call me lucky for nothing. And but as a result of that, I took part in some research, you know, in what's called a medication for treating heart disease. But one of the things that I found out to me cost there is a lot of travel insurers won't insure you if you've taken part in research which involves the use of medication, which caused me a tremendous amount of problems. But getting back to the here and now, I was diagnosed in 2016 with vascular dementia, and I found myself in a total void. I was forcibly retired from work, and I was just sat at home vegetating. I knew, you know, I had much to offer, because, you know, I'd done a lot of research about it, and I contacted the Alzheimer Society, and through the Alzheimer Society, I began doing lots of work. I work principally with Dementia United, and that's guided me towards an awful lot of research. But now I'll address your questions. I hope you don't mind me if I'm just going through this, because my memory is not that brilliant. How researchers explain to you the length of time research projects take to complete. Now, I found, to my experience, that there's, rightly or wrongly, but I find that organisations such as universities who work with you research keep you totally in the loop, whereas students very rarely keep you in the loop, you know. So you just I know where I am with official bodies, you know, because, and I think there's that level of continuity when you're working with organisations, as to opposed, you know, to when you're just working with individuals. I mean, I remember once an individual came and they stayed 5 minutes, gave me a packet of biscuits, asked me 2 questions, then went on the phone, stayed about 7.5 minutes, and then they went, and that was it. I've never heard anything at all about it. And, you know, time is precious to me, and you know, I want to use it productively. It's never really been explained to me, you know, how this, the studies that have been involved with, how they will benefit, you know, society as a whole, people living with dementia. You know, is it a case of you working towards making change, or is it is the focus just on your studies kind of thing? You're not going to actually affect change. You're just going to find out, you know, exactly what the status quo, but it's not going to change my life in any way. I think I'm done now for that, Sarah.
No, that's really great insight, John. And it is something that comes back from a lot of people, that often they may not know what the outcomes are going to be and don't necessarily hear back from researchers. I'd like to think it's something we all want to work on, and being able to explain what our projects are doing. And yeah, so it might be something that we pick up in the smaller breakout groups as well and have a longer conversation about. So I also just want to bring Jav in at this point, because I think you said you were going to answer this question specifically as well.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name's Jav, or I prefer Jav rather than Javid, because it sounds less informal. And if I get called Javid, it looks like I'm in trouble. So that's why I always prefer Jav. I'm a neurodivergent person myself. My dad suffers early onset of dementia, so I understand the complexities of neurodiversity in terms of someone suffering from dementia, me being neurodivergent, and the communication between the two of us. And in regards to research, I think once you get involved, you understand and are able to navigate, you know, like the arena or the landscape a lot easier, because sometimes the titles make it quite difficult for you to think, do I really fit in? And that, I think, is due to lack of experience or people so used to writing in academia and not translating that language in layman terms. And it's very important to translate it to layman terms. Then you will get more public participants. And from there, when you get the participants, it's always very important to manage expectations. So, you know, like they know what's going to be the outcome, timeline, etc., and what's going to happen at certain stages. And because otherwise, the like rapport building eventually will lead to trust. And once you get that trust, it takes time to like get it, yet it will be very easy to lose it. You just have to do once or something very little to think so. And other thing to remember is the people that you're engaging with, they're all individuals, so their neurodiversity will be slightly different. So you have to kind of check in at the beginning, try to get to know each other before you start making progress in the research. So basically, it's more about team building, getting to know each other, because obviously sometimes personalities from PPI members can, you know, like have an impact between them. So it's managing that and ensuring ultimately it's a safe space for people to open up and give you that personal information, and that comes under chapter master rules or whatever what other name you want to give it. But personally, me being involved, the way I look at it is it will make impact in about 5 to 10 years time, because research has an impact on delivery. So, you know, I can't change anything dramatically now, but later on, hopefully, my contribution will have an impact on the way things are delivered in services and in communities, and hopefully inequalities, the word should disappear. And that's what my personal passion is. You know, like, so the word, you know, like inequalities, we're no longer talking about it. So everyone is getting equitable services. Oh, quiet.
That's wonderful, Jav. Thank you so much. And yeah, I think we're all standing on the shoulder of giants in research. We all want to make that difference, but it can be incremental, stepwise, every once in a while. Well, most of the time, but we are trying to make those big differences. It's not always as easy, but thank you so much. That's a wonderful answer. I'm sorry that we're going quite quickly here. I do sessions like this and they seem to, you know, go so quickly. So question number 2 was, how have researchers supported you and your community to become involved in research? So we had 2 people answering this. So one of them was going to be Michael. Do you have your thoughts on this, Michael? And could you introduce yourself as well? Thank you.
Hello, my name's Michael. I'm a person living with Alzheimer's. I'm 4th generation of person with it. My mom had it and has sadly passed away, so I know the caring side of it as well, as we cared for her. I do a lot of work in research, working along with the Alzheimer's Society, the NIHR, Department of Health, pharmaceutical companies, Dementia UK, the list goes on. How have researchers helped me and members of my community to get involved? It's the attitude to research, the wanting to change things, that really motivates me to get involved. To see that people, I mean, quite a lot of you here as researchers will probably in some way or another been affected by dementia. And it's that motivation to want to change things, to want to have a look to try and make an improvement that really makes the difference for us wanting to get involved. Of course, as been mentioned, and I mentioned it as well, so is John, that we have a vested interest. But that vested interest, as Jav said, is not necessarily going to help us now. It's going to help people in the future. And that's really what we want to be able to change, is the future of dementia. So the attitude that researchers have, their willingness, really makes a difference. Their motivation keeps us motivated. And we hope in turn we keep you motivated to keep on going when sometimes, let's face it, it can be a thankless position to be in, facing with dementia. And even doing the research, your research may end up not proving what you wanted it to prove. But that in itself is an answer. So it does give you something, doesn't it, that you're able to work with. And that just keeps us motivating. It rules things out, it rules things in, and we just keep on going. There is an area, though, that is really important that's mentioned in the question, and that's diverse communities. Why is that important? Because the challenges that we face in our lives affects the way we deal with dementia. So it's important that we try to get as many voices as we possibly can so that we can get a very rounded picture of how dementia affects people. It's proven by science, by yourselves, that certain types of dementia affect different communities in different ways. So why does that happen? There are many different questions, but how can we get that community involved? Well, here, unfortunately, we're facing culture a lot of times. And I think it's very important that what we might need to do is go outside of the dementia community. Look into other charities so that we can get the direction in. They can point us to people living with dementia, people who are caring for people with dementia. And that way we start to build up that community that's really important. And then we all work together. Irrespective of who we are, what we are, we all work together to find a cure, a medication, answers to dementia. And I think that's the real key then, in order to try and help us all work together.
Sorry, brilliant. Thank you so much, Michael. I've also got Jav coming in on this one.
In this question, I've got a vested interest. I also sit on the Greater Manchester Equality Alliance, and we just mentioned the word culture. The word culture, it's the understanding of it could be very different to every single person. And when we say culture or attracting diverse communities, the word diverse in terms of ONS data is very limited, because you might categorize people in terms of their ethnicities, yet I'm from an ethnicity that doesn't get recognized by the ONS data. So, like, technically, fundamentally, your starting block, you have failed slightly already. So then, therefore, you have to put a caveat in to say this, like, even though they're categorized by this ONS data, for example, British Pakistani, I'm not. I'm a British Kashmiri, and because there's no box for me to take, I always go in the other box, and the other box always gets ignored because not many people go in there, and that data, there's too much people putting so much in on a pie chart, you probably won't even see the line on there. So I think and other thing in regards to diverse communities is understanding the subject area, if there's any stigma associated with it, and that creates a whole host of other problems, microaggressions within those communities, and also having an understanding about consultation fatigue, in terms of they've been consulted so many times and nothing's changed. And it's not that those communities don't want to help, it's actually knowing the right language, how to engage. So basically you break your whole model down, and the word that's going around at the moment, which is quite popular, co-production. And in a way, research is that. And what I would say, like, there's three elements. most people talk about 2 elements. I think I would say 3 elements. The first one I would say it's co-create. So basically you sit with those people that you want to engage and say, this is the area that I want to look at. How would you think it's best to phrase the question? How, how do we get the key points that we want to get out the research? Then from there, when people mention peer reviewing, looking at the applications, etc., that's the core. That's sorry, creation at that point. So it's been actually making something actually a little bit more tangible. And then ultimately, when we say vested interest, it's that core delivery. So if we are continuing the research, or there's 2 elements to part of the research, so especially if there's the research element, and after that there's an element of medication or any other intervention, because they've been involved right from the beginning, they will take ownership, and the insight you will get from that ownership will be a lot more significant than them just contributing to part of research, because they consider it that it belongs to them. So also it gives them a purpose, and people always forget that. People with dementia, neurodiversity, sometimes don't even get out of the house. You might be the only person that they speak to outside of their own house. So that needs to be recognized. And also, it doesn't happen in universities, but more statutory organizations. They'll only see you as lived experience or your condition. We are a lot more than that. We have a background in education, we've had jobs previously. So, understand, we bring a lot more to the table than just that particular research element. So, the person's knowledge will be significantly more than you may realize. For example, my mum was on a lot of medication. My dad is, I am. So 90% of the time, if I see a medication box, straight away I'll be able to recognize it and I know what it's for. And some people, they won't understand that. And when I challenge people saying, look, that's wrong for these particular reasons, they look at you and think, you're not qualified. I go, but I know how it impacts the person, even though medication interacts slightly differently due to the chemical balances within the body. Some elements will be the same across the spectrum of people taking it. And I think don't look down the funnel. It's basically the other way around. You're looking through the telescope to a wider picture rather than just focusing on one particular area. What is the impact that it will have on the wider scale? And also from that, it will open up other avenues and research elements. For example, one element, last comment I'm going to make is I like technology, and I've put so much investment around my dad. And one, it gives me ease, because he used to lose the door key, for example, to the house all the time, and it was changing all the locks. Now I've got an electronic lock. All I have to do is delete the fob and give him a new one. And 2, the mobile phone that he carries, it's in my name, so I could track where it is. So I could find out where he is if I need to. So it's little things like that. Technology will help you. It's recognizing how to use that technology to keep the person with dementia or any other long-term conditions safe.
Yeah. Wonderful. I'm apologising to Kevin, because Kevin was meant to be giving us a little bit of a vignette when he first came in, but we're running a tiny bit behind. But Kevin's going to come in first on this next question, and he can tell you a little bit more about himself then. So the next question is, can you give an example you've been involved in research? So we're specifically interested in what stage of the research you might have been involved in. So Kevin, would you mind introducing yourself and coming in on this question? Thank you so much.
No problem, Sarah. I'm delighted to be here. Kevin Quaid. I was diagnosed just over 9 years ago with Parkinson's, and then about 7 years ago with Lewy body dementia. And I got involved in research after a couple of years. And I was looking at the question, and I went back to the very first piece of research that I was ever involved in, that I was involved in on my own. And to give you a quick background, it was Laura Philbin in the Alzheimer Society said, "You'll be doing a piece of research." And I thought that I'd be doing it with her. And she said, "No, you're going to be doing it with a professor in the university." And I'm thinking, oh my God, what can I say to you, a professor? How can I talk to you, a professor in the university? But little did I know that Andrew at the other side was thinking, oh my God, how am I going to talk to a man who has dementia? So within 10 minutes, it was on Zoom and it was during COVID. So that added extra spice to the piece of research. So within 10 minutes, we just got comfortable with one another over the Zoom. I had literally tore up his sheets to get through them away. And he brought me in from word go. Now, the project was Re-Empowerment Against Loneliness, because it's our REAL for short, for people living with dementia. And it was a kind of a peer program. There was people from all walks of life, and we wanted them to pick up the phone and contact people who had dementia over COVID. And I'm just looking at the 8 pages of questions that we had, and I just reckon that in every bit of research that's ever gone on. But Andrew realized the importance of having the lived experience front and central in research, and even lab-based research. And I was involved all the way. I think within the first hour, he made me co-author, and he said, if I was coming to you, what are the questions you would like me to ask you? And we did it over a period of months. And then the people were recruited to ask the people to ring the people who had dementia. They were the same as Andrew. They were terrified to talk to them. So I said, guys, why don't you do your practice calls with me? And it was a short research project. It ran over 6 months, and we did it together. Like we fed off each other's strengths. And people from the outside world, when I say that, I mean people that don't have dementia, they really were able to feed into both of us. And the fact that I was involved from day one made them feel a lot more comfortable in actually speaking with people with other types of dementia. And the questions were set up in such a way, like I'm just looking at them, and if I have time, I'll just call out a couple of the questions that I have. I have 1 page map, but of course it's gone. I mean, listen to how simple this is. What is your name? Is there another name you'd like to be called? Where is your home? Who do you live with? Who do you like to spend time with? What food do you like to eat if you're not feeling well? Places you like to go, music that makes you happy, things that make you feel good. What would a good day be for you? What would a bad day be for you? What do you want to have a good day? What would you like to have a bad day? What was your favorite holidays? They were so simple questions, but you really got to know the person. And I was looking back, and I must say the research has come along in leaps and bounds in the last 8 years, and I think the value of the lived experience. And when I say by lived experience, I mean the value of the person who has dementia and the carer. Because I always say, I've no idea what it's like to live with Lewy body dementia, but my wife does. But I know what it's like to have it. So if you have both voices in the piece of research, and I have a kind of a general rule. If it's a short-term project in research, when I say short term, I mean 6 months or less, or 12 months or less, and there's only one researcher, and I want to be involved in the project. I will be involved in it, But if it's 2 or 3 year project, there's only one researcher, I'd be very slow to get involved, because I'd be afraid that I'd be have to commit to my time, and the lecturer or the researcher might be after getting a job in the meantime and left me high and dry and had the time wasted. But yeah, for me, it's my favorite part of my advocacy work, research. It's so important, and it is it's the backbone of everything we do. And someone said a while ago, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. I am, and I'm hoping the next people that you come along will make the lives of the next Kevin Quaid with Lewy body dementia that little bit easier. I hope that gives you just an idea of what it was like for me in my first piece of research.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin. We're going to claw a little bit of time back from the end, so I'm giving a bit of extra time to this conversation because it's really wonderful. I'm just quickly going to bring John in on this same question. Thank you, John.
Yeah, my excuse me, my most memorable and important piece of research was done with Lancaster University, and I first started that not long after my diagnosis in 2016, and it's still ongoing work now. And it started off. I was met by a chap called Andy, who came to my home and stayed for 2 hours, you know, and I was captivated by the conversation. Indeed, I would say Andrew came as a researcher and left as a friend. And the research was called Demm, which is short for dementia training. And it involved visiting 67 hospitals in the United Kingdom to see, you know, what training was being given to staff in relation to dementia, and it brought out skills in me, you know, that I never thought I had. I mean, I've done an awful lot of public speaking for him. I've done television appearances, and research documents. I've been involved, you know, with preparing research documents, promotional materials. I even designed T-shirts, and I don't know if anybody has heard of a chap who unfortunately died recently. He was a very famous cartoonist, Tony Husband, and I did an awful lot of work with him. But like I say, you know, the work it still continues, and there's recently been a book I've co-authored and wrote the foreword for, a book which basically explains the study and the consequences and the changes that it's made, which I refer to my previous question, the previous answer, where I didn't know where anything was going or what happened with that research. I'm fully, you know, familiar with, you know, with that. But again, whilst the Demm study in itself has finished, I've developed such a rapport with Lancaster University. I'm now also involved in other dementia research, bids. And there's a saying, out of little acorns. Not only am I working for Lancaster University, but people have moved on. I'm now working with Bradford University and Salford University. I most recently last year with Salford University went to the radiology unit and inspected the new radiology units that they're thinking of rolling out, and to see its suitability for people with dementia. Now, I'm pleased to say that they've taken absolutely everything on board, and where modifications are needed, you know, they're actually provided. Recruiting participants. I've not really recruited participants, but that's not for want of trying. It's, you know, for what's called, well, basically getting people involved. But yeah, dementia at Lancaster University, I've got so much to thank them for, you know, and that's me again.
Thank you, John. That's wonderful. I'm going to ask one more question, number 5, which Helen was going to answer. We might move into the breakout rooms, which is around payment and recognition, just in the, because of time. But number 4, Helen, I'd love you to introduce yourself and come in on this one. So this is, in your experience, how much time and input do you feel is appropriate for you to give to any single research project? Have there been times when you've been asked too little or too much? So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everybody. I'm Helen Metzger, and I'm actually in California. I have been involved. I've had 3 first-degree relatives who have succumbed to Lewy body dementia, and I was primary carer to 2 of them, my father and my sister. So I have 2 young onsets because it was my sister and my youngest brother, and their onsets, if we look back, their first symptoms were in their 30s. So I've been involved with this disease for 35 years. I'm a support group facilitator, and I sit on way too many advisory panels. And I also advise the U.S. government. When it comes to, I'm one of those people that, given the impact on my family, and we have concerns about the next generation, that I will give you my right arm. I actively participate. I'm in 2 longitudinal studies. I have 2 generations in my family in research, both genetic and other studies. We've gone back now probably 17 years that we've been involved in research between my sister, my youngest brother, and now onward. So for me, it is important for me knowing that there is a genetic factor in my family. So it is essential to me that we participate, not only to help future generations of our own family, but globally. And then also to be able to partner with researchers is absolutely essential. And I've been able to do that due to my sister saying, I want to be evaluated at an academic center. And for whatever reason, from day one, they zeroed in on this family most likely has an autosomal dominant factor. We need to keep them on board with us. And they did and still do. Even though my sister has been gone for 6 years now, I am still involved with those same researchers on both a research level, but more importantly, on an advisory level. And I actually consulted with them on Lewy body, how to outreach to people in the community, how to engage with them throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. And so it's, for me, I don't believe, but it's personal. For me, I'll give everything I've got to make a difference. But there are others, I know, I have friends that I've worked with on committees that they want to do a one-off, right? They want to just say, all right, I want to only deal with this topic. I will work on caregiver issues. I don't want to be, others only want to do drug trials. They want to know, or hopefully not get the placebo. They don't want to be the control group, but they don't know whether they are or not, right? So there will be people so diverse in what they want to give and what they're, because I believe that families like my own, even though we're told up front, you won't reap a benefit from this, the outcomes will be what they will be. There's still that glimmer of hope sitting in the back of their minds. I'll tell you that right now. That maybe, there's something, and maybe this will accelerate and I can still reap a benefit. And I know that isn't necessarily going to happen, but I'll tell you, most recently, it has for me. And that I will share very, very quickly. 9 years ago, when I started involvement as PPI, it was on a particular research study out of the University of California, San Francisco. Now on the federal committee I sit on, that same program, it's a care navigation program, is now informing the test model that the US government is rolling out. So I am now seeing 9 years later, the benefits of what the PPI presented 9 years ago is bringing to bear. So you never know, folks. We may, this may all turn out well at some point. Yeah, but no, I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh, and yours as well, Helen. It's such a crazy time in the morning for you. Thank you so much. We do have Michael and Kevin coming in on this podcast. Can I ask if you're able to give a relatively quick answer, because I'm so keen to bring us into breakout rooms so we can have a closer conversation with fewer people. But can I bring Michael in first and then Kevin?
Say here from a person living with a mixed Alzheimer's. I'm going to speak for myself. I cannot speak for everybody living with dementia, because here it depends on the person. So from my point of view, as some of you will know, I do research with you. I will make all the time in the world for you. You're trying to help me. So the best I can do is try to help you have a better understanding. It is very important at this point to also mention that it's important to know the difference between involvement, engagement, and co-production. And I think that is very important to know the difference. I would rather you ask me too many questions than too little questions and make an assumption, get too far in your research, and suddenly it's wrong. So it's easier to ask. I mean, a lot of times the question is, send me a WhatsApp or something and I'll answer your question, or it's, can we have a 5-minute chat? We discuss the point. So for your project, if I'm involved with that, or I can answer any questions and guide you, I will always try and make as much time. Just a little point on this one is, based on the nature of the beast, the disease itself, there may be days where I might not be able to, where my speech might be a little bit more. So you'll have to be a little bit patient on that point of view, but where I can, I'll always make the time.
Thank you, Michael. And just finally, Kevin.
Can you just hit me with that question again? I'm getting slightly confused.
Oh, no, don't worry, Kevin. So in your experience, how much time and input do you feel is appropriate for you to give to any one research project? And have there been times when you've been asked too much or too little?
Oh, yeah. I'm not going to get involved in research if I don't think the research is that I can contribute in any way to it. If I get a sense that I'm just a box ticking exercise, I'll just flatly say no, I can't get involved in it. I'm having time or whatever. But if the research is of interest to me, it may sound selfish, but if the research is of interest to me, I don't think that there is such a thing as giving too much time to it. The one thing I hate is when, and it happened a couple of times, when I've got stuck in research projects I've been really interested in, and then for some reason or another, meetings are put off, you hear no more about the research, and then you're thinking, oh my God, what happened to that bit of research I did 12 months ago? And I think there's researchers out there that have this feeling that if they don't come up with positive results, and that we're after giving a lot of time, that they feel somehow or other it's kind of wrong to tell us, look, the results are positive. Positive results or negative results are results, and we need to know both. Because at some stage, even if the research comes up with negative results, well then maybe it's something that can be built on in the future. And the one thing about like payment, and I certainly don't mind giving my time and my time free, but if I have to travel, like, hotel, food, and that kind of expenses, I expect them to be paid because I'm only on a disability allowance. But I've been used as well down through the years, and it's been my own fault where companies have contacted me. They have used me for development of apps and stuff like that, apps and stuff that are being sold, and I haven't even been told the final outcome of them. And next thing you'll hear that they've been launched, they've been appeared. So you know, for people with dementia, it's a learning curve. But like that, it's very, very, very few that I will refuse, because it's for my benefit. It's for the benefit of those. You know, most of the research we're involved in now at the moment won't benefit me, but they might benefit the Kevin Quaids that are coming along in years to come. And I think that's why it's so important that we're not looking at ourselves, we're looking at the people that are going to be diagnosed in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time. And like, if we don't keep going, and if people don't take up the mantle that I'm running on, then, you know, where's it all going to end? It's only going to get worse for people. And my life as an advocate has become trying to make people's lives just a little bit easier.
Wonderful. Thank you everyone so much for those inputs. Now that we've been in our breakout rooms, I hope you had an opportunity to have a bit of a conversation with the person that you were with and to learn a little bit more. I was hoping that the facilitators of each room could read back a point or two about what was spoken about in the rooms. So I'll go first since I'm already chatting. We had so many interesting points raised in our room. I think one that's I find really, I don't know, personal and important is that Kevin raised about the mental health of researchers as well, and that he's had conversations where he's worked with people who, because of the subject matter and because of their personal lived experience as a researcher, but also as a person, you know, they're very affected by the research that they do. And he raised the fact that we really should be taking that into account as well, and researchers should have a safe outlet to be able to talk about these problems as well, but that as a person with lived experience as well, we need to be kind of a community and come together around each other and work so closely together, which I think was a absolutely lovely point. And we also just ended there talking about kind of barriers to citizenship once you get a diagnosis and that stigma that might emerge. And I mean, I think, again, I don't want to get Kevin's words wrong, because you speak so eloquently, Kevin, and I'm probably not getting all this down, but you said for yourself that although, you know, you did have friends who may have departed once they knew you had the diagnosis, the ones who mattered stayed, and you own that now. You know, I know your first book is, you know, I'm not Louis, I'm Kevin, isn't it? And although you're able to stand up and say, I'm Kevin, I have Lewy body dementia, the people who matter are still around. You're a member of your community. You feel that although there will always be stigma, you kind of have got round that a little bit. I don't know if you wanted to come in a little bit more on that, because I know I'm probably not representing you brilliantly.
Yeah, look, it was actually like the town I live in. I'm a Glory, and I'm only here 8 years. No one knew me. And a retired school teacher told me yesterday, he said, have you any, and not yesterday, a couple of weeks ago, I think it was after I getting my doctorate, he said, have you any idea, he said, what you have done to people in this town, in their understanding of dementia and getting rid of the stigma in dementia? He said, your nose must be very itchy, because he said so many people talk about you. And I do two things. I treat my advocacy work as my job. But then when I go to town for a pint or a coffee or whatever, I'm Kevin Quaid. You know, and I don't take myself too seriously. And it was like the other night, we were out for a drink, and there were 6 or 7 of us together, and one that said, I said, there's no point telling you, you'll forget about it in the morning. And I said, who are you? So, you know, it's not that I'm making fun of it, but I don't take myself too serious. I take my disease, I take my advocacy work very serious. But I'm a person that lives in a community that now understands dementia. And I have been told that it's down to what I have done, what I have said. I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid of it. And there are other people in the community who have dementia, and they have come out, and they are not afraid of it.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Sorry, that's wonderful. I'm just going to quickly move us on and ask Pallavi, what came out of your breakout room?
Discussion around what are the rewards and challenges that we as dementia researchers feel. And it was very kind of Michael to come in, and when we had a discussion on apprehension, especially for someone who is working with a multicultural group, there's diversity there, and how to go about it, because we don't want to cross the line and just it might just hurt someone. Or it was Michael who said that just ask for it and you might know, and if there's something that hurts the other person, they'll be very upfront in a very kind way to tell you that this is what is not working and this is what will work. And then mutually we develop this relationship, and like everybody's been talking about, it's all about building relationship that comes, the trust and the friendship that comes over. And then we had some time to discuss about the last question for the panel on PPI, the engagement rewards and the time they put in, some good and bad practices, like what they feel about it. So got some insight where point was rightly put. When we as researchers ask our members to make their own payments and then claim it from the university can be a little challenging for a person because they're already in some benefits, and putting in can be a lot. The reclaim comes after 8 weeks. So better to use vouchers. That would be interesting. And definitely they're not feeling like they should get some reinforcements. It is what they want to do it. It's their motivation to do something for the people now and for future. So that is what it was all about. Yeah.
Jav spoke really eloquently about digital inclusion and being aware that when you're running your research in an online context with PPI members, that you may have people who are not very experienced with using Zoom, etc. So to consider maybe providing a little bit of training, but also realizing that they might not have access to sort of systems like some like laptops and tablets, etc. So maybe even loaning them to them so that they can take part, and then this will create more diversity in your participation pool. And then just also reminding us that maybe there's also a requirement for an additional reimbursement towards the costs of taking part online, towards maybe, I think the NIHR is also advising about £5 to cover internet costs for taking part. We also spoke about sort of managing expectations and making sure that you're not setting yourself up to provide a tick box exercise for people. So allowing some part of the meetings to also be a little bit informal, where everyone gets to know each other. And then Jav also said a lot about, the terms and languages you're using, like using the word data sometimes can be quite exclusive, and sort of being more mindful of that, and appreciating the intersectionality of the individuals that you're meeting with. And then we talked a little bit about reimbursement as well, and what was considered best practice, with the NIHR advisement of around £25. Jav saying yes, that's really appropriate because it's basically double of the minimum wage, and that kind of does reimburse the idea of you're paying an expert for their time. So obviously in professional settings we would pay experts more, so £25 is probably around a good incentive to make someone feel valued as well. I'm not sure, Jav, Neil or Liz, if I'm missing anything else, but that's what I kind of wrote down and remembered from our brief discussion.
We had some really interesting discussions. We had one about perceptions of PPIE or PPI, and one of the points that was raised is how useful it involving people is for grounding research, having a sounding board, helping to steer, and the sort of validation that involvement gives to a piece of research. There's a question about how do we reach out to people in our communities, and Esther said she'd found this quite challenging during her PhD because it was during COVID, and so all activities had to be done online. But in doing that sort of helps to reveal some of the benefits of that you can reach out to people who you wouldn't ordinarily be able to reach out because you've got that facility of online, and that. But there are some limitations to that because of all the people who aren't involved in sort of digital. You know, they haven't got a email address, or they're not involved online at all. Also, that reaching out to people probably involves going through gatekeepers, which may be, you know, going through the a deep group, or maybe an NHS organisation, but that those organisations seem to be very willing to sort of help to facilitate contact between people living with dementia and researchers. And then Helen's sort of final question was around cultural diversity, and how do we reach more diverse communities, and that Helen talked a little bit about the sort of church and spiritual communities, faith communities, and how those sort of people who facilitate those communities or are leading can open up their communities and pull people with dementia in who are sort of got those identities already. So that was really interesting. And then how important it is to know who's who in your community, so that you can make connections with those people. And I think that's about it. Sorry, I haven't probably quite done it justice, but
I'm just going to quickly wrap up a couple of points. I'm very conscious of time. So yeah, we had a really good discussion as well. So one on dissemination, a couple of questions on disseminations. So John answered that keeping people in the loop, keeping them engaged, keeping them in the loop, and making them feel valued, really. So that they feel valued. So that's, yeah, I'm just going to quickly stop. So it's about dissemination. So the key points there. And then about impact, I mean, stigma, culture, and impact. So John answered that the more I believe in the subject, then I would want to get involved. So there is that kind of, you know, stigma and culture things, but also people should just love the work they want to do, and then they want to get involved. So the others within our breakout room, have I missed anything? Or John, have I missed anything that you want to answer? Okay, great. Yeah, so that's it, I think. So I was very conscious of time. Really sorry we overrun. So, but yeah, really thank you very much for all being here and making this a success.
Yep, I don't have anything to add really, other than thanks so much for our contributors today. It's been wonderful listening to you. I hope everyone found that helpful. Never have enough time when we're doing things like this, but you know, I've really enjoyed it. And also thanks to our last minute breakout room facilitators too.
Right, is there anything? Okay, great. Thank you very much.